Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this for a second. You have just laid out this completely flawless, well-researched argument. I mean, your logic is perfectly airtight. You've brought the receipts, the whole shebang. But instead of actually addressing a single fact you just brought up, your opponent looks at you with this smug grin, crosses their arms, points a finger directly at you and says, "But wait, didn't you do the exact same thing last year?" And just like that, in a split second, your perfectly crafted argument is completely derailed. So let me ask you a direct question. Have you ever criticized, say, a toxic system or a bad policy, only for some internet troll to completely dismiss you by saying, well, you participate in society, so you can't complain? Right? We've all been there. You raise a totally valid point, and suddenly you are hit with this accusation that you just aren't perfectly pure enough to even have an opinion. It is incredibly frustrating. But today, we are going to decode exactly how to handle it. All right, let's get into part one, the problem. Specifically, the appeal to hypocrisy. So, tu quoque, that's Latin for you too. In the world of logic, it is a super well-documented fallacy known as the appeal to hypocrisy, and it operates a lot like a personal ad hominem attack. Basically, a manipulative opponent will use this to dispute your claims simply because you have failed to act consistently with those claims in your own life. They are deliberately dismissing your viewpoint on an issue purely because you aren't perfectly consistent yourself. The underlying manipulative strategy here is actually really simple. Your opponent is essentially broadcasting to the room, "Hey everyone, this person is a hypocrite, so why on earth should I listen to what they are saying?" It is a brilliantly devious way to just completely dismiss your well-researched viewpoint based entirely on your personal history, rather than actually engaging with the merit of your ideas. Mechanically, the manipulator is creating a hard division here. On one side, we have the argument, the actual idea, the facts, the hard data. And on the other side, we have the speaker. That's you, the person. The tu quoque fallacy is literally designed to shatter the argument by taking a magnifying glass and pointing it exclusively at the speaker. They hijack your logic in 3 distinct steps. First off, this tactic completely ignores the actual facts you just presented. Second, it aggressively inspects your personal history looking for any minor, tiny flaw. And third, it forces you right onto the defensive. Your opponent successfully uses your own past actions to completely shatter your present logical points. Which brings us to part 2, the agitation. Let's dive into the whataboutism trap. All right, here is a highly relatable, real-world example of this trap in action. Imagine you're carefully pointing out the genuine, well-documented flaws of modern capitalism. But instead of debating economic theory or data, your opponent traps you by pointing out your consumer choices. They'll say, "Oh, you're talking about how capitalism sucks while tweeting from your iPhone and wearing Nikes?" See what happened? This is answering valid criticism with completely irrelevant counter-criticism based strictly on your consumer choices. Or take this much simpler example. You make the perfectly valid moral claim that lying is wrong, but your opponent immediately counters by pointing out that you have, in fact, actually lied at some point in your own life. The trap is officially sprung the moment your opponent points out your failure to live up to your own ideals. And what exactly happens inside our minds when this trap gets sprung? We experience the guilt trap reaction. Because you have lied or because you do own an iPhone, you feel this sudden, sharp pang of guilt. Your instinct kicks in. You start backtracking on the actual argument, you start defending your character, and you desperately try to explain why you did it just that one time. And meanwhile, the actual debate is completely dead. But here is the ultimate logical reality check for you. A hypocrite can still tell the truth. Failing to live up to an ideal absolutely does not make the original claim false. Just because you have lied in the past does not make the statement lying is wrong incorrect. It just means you aren't perfect. But the manipulator wants to use your imperfection entirely against you. We see this rapid-fire deflection constantly in the real world, especially in political debates. Think about how often you see politicians entirely ignore a tough policy question by just shouting, "But what about your emails?" Or "What about your record?" This is the tu quoque fallacy shifting the burden of proof entirely away from their own bad arguments and slapping it right onto the personal history of their opponent. Now, brace yourself for a wild psychological fact that explains exactly why this tactic is so devastating. Studies actually show that when our personal consistency is attacked, like when someone calls us a hypocrite, the threat detection center in our brain lights up exactly as if we faced a literal, physical threat. Crazy, right? This means the attack triggers a literal fight or flight response. It activates your deepest survival instincts. You start to panic over your personal consistency, And in that state of biological panic, you completely forget to debate the facts. Manipulators use this tactic specifically to trigger your fight or flight response, ensuring the actual evidence is left entirely in the dust. So let's move on to part 3, the solution. Let's look at the ideal versus reality framework so you can finally stop taking the bait. This is a highly actionable 3-step framework you can use to completely shut down this deflection in real time. Step 1 is to own the inconsistency. Step 2 is to label the deflection. And step 3 is to force the pivot. Let's break down exactly what you should say for each of these steps. Step 1 acts as an absolute iron shield against their attacks. You have to own the inconsistency to neutralize their blackmail. You just look at them calmly and state, "You're right, I have fallen short of this standard in the past, but my personal flaws do not make the standard wrong." The absolute worst thing you can do here is try to prove you're a perfect human being. By simply agreeing with their premise, you immediately take away all of their ammunition. Okay, so once you have owned the flaw, move directly to step 2, label the deflection. You immediately call out the logical trick. Say, "You're using a Tu Quoque fallacy because you don't have a valid counterargument to the facts I just presented." Boom! This exposes the opponent's total lack of an actual argument and lets them know you see right through their strategy. And finally, step 3, force the pivot. You want to deliver this line precisely. "We can debate my personal life later if you want. Are you going to address the evidence or just keep deflecting?" Do not linger on your own character for another second. You are aggressively pivoting away from yourself and forcing that spotlight intensely back onto the issue you brought up in the first place. And finally, we arrive at the ultimate mic drop. This is basically your psychological cheat code. I really want you to memorize this exact response. Next time they try to corner you with whataboutism, you look that troll dead in the eye, smile slightly, and say, "It is entirely possible for me to be a hypocrite and for you to be completely wrong at the same time." Now back to the data. Watch as their perceived power in the conversation completely shatters. The absolute most crucial point to remember here is this. A genuine debate is about discovering the truth of a claim. It is never, ever about comparing resumes of moral purity to see who is a perfect person. You must always, always separate the argument from the arguer. So, are you ready to dismantle toxic arguments and decode the matrix of critical thinking in your everyday life? I really hope this explainer has equipped you with the tools to stay sharp against these manipulative tricks. Don't let them change the subject on you ever again. Keep your focus on the facts, practice that 3-step framework, and be sure to join us for our next explainer where we will be decoding the fascinating trap of the either-or hostage situation. Until next time, stay focused and keep learning.